Grease on my hands, gasoline in the air, and my son's voice cutting through it. If you won't go to a home, then get out of my house. That's how last fall ended for me, not with leaves on the ground, but with a door slamming shut between two men who shared the same last name. It sounds simple, doesn't it? Just another family argument, an old stubborn father and a successful son running out of patience. But the truth is, that was the last time I ever stood inside my own home. The house I built from the first brick to the last nail, where every hammer strike, every drop of sweat, carried the name of my late wife, Grace. My name is Jack Morrison, 66 years old, former owner of Morrison Classic Motors, a small garage in Nashville, Tennessee. I built my life with my hands, not with a signature. And him, Ryan, my son, the man I once believed would carry my craft forward. He's now the CEO of Morrison Auto Group, living in a glass office above the city, where a person's worth is measured by shares and status, and by the filtered smiles of his wife Samantha, a woman who loves the spotlight more than the people standing in it. Before I tell you what really happened after that door closed, tell me where you're watching from. And if you believe that silence can sound louder than justice, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That afternoon, Nashville was golden, the kind of sunlight that melts across metal like warm honey. I was polishing the hood of my '67 Mustang Fastback, the same car Grace and I restored during the summer of '85. On the radio, the Eagles were singing "Take It Easy." And for a moment I believed life had finally quieted down, until I heard the sound of high heels, sharp, cold, echoing across the concrete. Click, click, like metal tapping on bone. Samantha walked in first, white dress hair pulled tight, that smile people wear when they're about to lie. Ryan followed in a tailored suit, holding a thin folder. "Dad," he said lightly, "we just need you to sign some tax papers." I looked down at the pages. Fine print, legal clauses, property transfers, powers of attorney. "Taxes?" I asked slowly. "Yeah, it's just a formality," Samantha chimed in, her voice sweet and sharp like glass. "You don't need to read it all. You wouldn't understand how business works these days, Jack." I set the rag down, looked her dead in the eye. "Business, huh? You mean making money off someone else's name?" Ryan's jaw tightened. His eyes dropped. "Dad, please don't start." "I'm not starting," I said. "I'm just not done." The air thickened like the smell of fuel in a closed garage. The radio kept playing, but the music suddenly sounded like metal scraping across the heart. And then I heard the words, the kind that no father ever deserves to hear. "Get out, old man. This is my house now." The room fell dead silent. I could hear the wall clock ticking. And in that moment, I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I didn't even move fast. I just pulled off my gloves, folded them neatly, placed them on the bench, the way a mechanic ends his final shift. Each step I took toward the door felt like dragging the weight of 30 years behind me. Every brick in that house had passed through my hands. Every crack in the wall I had patched after every storm. And now it belonged to people who didn't even know what fresh paint smelled like. As I walked past Ryan, there was a flicker in his eyes, hesitation, maybe even guilt. But it was gone in a second, like headlights passing over a puddle. Samantha folded her arms, smiled that victorious smile. "Well," she said, "guess you finally know where you belong." I didn't look back. I only said quietly, "Home isn't where the walls are. It's where someone still remembers your name." Then I walked out. The sky had turned bronze. Sunlight glinted off the Mustang's silver paint, and for a second I saw my own reflection, a man aged by work, but still standing tall. Behind me, the front door closed. A small sound, but heavy like the lid sealing shut on a coffin filled with memories. Wind brushed past, carrying the faint smell of gasoline and rain. Somewhere down the street, a deep engine roared steady, confident, familiar. I turned. A black Cadillac Fleetwood 1965 rolled up the driveway. Its headlights cut through the thin mist, casting long gold beams against my garage wall. The driver's door opened. And there she was, Eleanor Brooks, a name I hadn't said aloud in 30 years. Back then we worked side by side in a small shop in Franklin. Then life happened, she left, I stayed, and Grace came along. For a few seconds, she didn't say a word. She looked at me, then at the house behind me. There was no pity in her eyes, only understanding. "Get in, Jack," she said quietly. "Don't let them see you break. We've got work to do." I hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. The leather seat creaked, the smell of time still trapped inside. In the rearview mirror, I caught my reflection, older, yes, but there was still steel behind the eyes. The Cadillac rolled forward, tires crunching over the gravel. In the mirror, I saw Ryan standing at the door, watching puzzled, as if he couldn't fathom why the old man, who didn't belong anymore, was being driven away in something far more valuable than all his polished ambition. I watched him until the house disappeared behind the trees. Eleanor turned on the radio, soft jazz, a saxophone low and smoky, the sound of someone who had lost and learned. "You kept the Cadillac," I said. She smiled faintly. "You once told me things with a soul never die." I looked out at the fading city lights, the hum of the engine beneath us. "Maybe you were right," I murmured. The car slid quietly into the Nashville night, past neon signs and shuttered diners, into the kind of darkness that only comes when you've finally left everything behind. And in that silence, I realized something. I wasn't running away. I was just leaving the battlefield I used to call home. The I-65 was almost empty that night. A thin drizzle painted the windshield silver, and the headlights swept across each road sign like flickers of memory, bright for a second, then gone in the mirror. I sat in the passenger seat, silent. The 1965 Cadillac Fleetwood purred through the rain, its V8 engine humming low and steady, like the heartbeat of a tamed beast. Eleanor Brooks, the woman I hadn't seen in nearly 30 years, still drove the way she always had, both hands tight on the wheel, eyes locked on the road ahead, lips pressed together as if holding back something she wasn't ready to say. In the reflection of the glass, I saw a man, older, lonelier, but whose eyes refused to die out. Maybe because the woman beside him was the only one who ever truly understood his faith in simple things, steel oil, and honor. The last time I saw Eleanor was in 1989. We'd run a small restoration shop together in Franklin. I handled engines, she did the bodywork and paint. Those were years filled with the sound of hammers, classic rock on cheap radios, and laughter out that stayed in the air long after sunset. Then came the job offer from Atlanta, a big firm, big money, big promises. I told her she should go. She asked if I'd come with her. I said Grace needs me here. That was it. No goodbye. Just a damp afternoon, and a cloud of dust rising behind her old Chevy as she drove away from Morrison and Brooks restorations. I stayed, and the sign faded one letter at a time. Now 30 years later, she was sitting beside me again, same posture, same focus. Only the silver in her hair had replaced the fire in it. Her voice broke the quiet, roughened by time. "Ryan's getting ready to take Morrison Auto Group public next spring," she said. I turned toward her. "How do you know that I've got someone on the review board?" she said, and one name caught their eye. "Jack Morrison, founding shareholder. You're still listed on the original registration." "Did you know that?" I frowned. No. I thought my son moved everything when he incorporated. Eleanor shook her head. He can't. Your original ownership from Morrison Classic Motors still ties the company to you. If he wants to go public, he'll have to prove you signed a transfer. I exhaled slowly. And you think he forged it? She glanced at me. No. I think Samantha did. The air in the car thickened. Rain streaked across the windows, thin, crooked lines like scratches on steel. Jack, she said softly, do you remember 2014? Of course, I replied. The year Grace passed. She nodded, eyes fixed ahead. There was a medical power of attorney in her hospital file, right? Yes, I said. I signed it so the insurance and surgery could go faster. Do you still have a copy? No. I didn't think I'd need one. I trusted them. She was quiet for a long moment, then reached into the back seat and pulled out a folder. This is a copy from the Tennessee Notary Database, she said. Date of signing, May 2014. Your signature is real. But there's an added clause inserted in November 2015. I scanned the page. The fine print read, the authorized party may act on behalf of the grantor in any matters of property insurance and related assets. Just one sentence, but enough to turn a medical consent into a financial weapon. Eleanor looked at me, her eyes soft now. Jack. Samantha edited that document. She sent the fake copy to the bank to secure a mortgage on the Morrison Roadhouse. That's how Ryan got his startup capital. I didn't speak for a long time. The hum of the engine filled the silence. Each word she'd said cut like cold metal, clean, sharp, undeniable. They say age teaches forgiveness. Maybe it does. But some wounds aren't there to forgive, they exist, to remind you that trust needs maintenance like an engine. Ignore it, and it rusts. Then it breaks. I remembered that year clearly. Grace on the hospital bed, pale but still smiling, her hand in mine. Samantha at the foot of the bed, voice soft and sweet, saying, if I'd just signed the papers, the insurance would move faster, the operation could happen sooner. So I signed, not thinking of money or property or consequences, only that I might save the woman I loved. I didn't know that my signature that day was the key they'd use to unlock everything I'd built. The car slowed and pulled over. Rain still whispered against the windshield. Eleanor cut the engine but left the headlights on. The golden light spilled across my face, showing every crease time had carved there. Now you understand why I came for you, she said. I do, I answered quietly. But I still don't know why you care. She smiled sadly. Because Grace called me 1 week before she died. My heart stopped. She called you. Eleanor nodded. She said, if I don't make it, watch over Jack. He doesn't know what they're doing. Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't. She was right, Jack. You trusted the wrong people. I lowered my head. Outside, the rain tapping on the roof sounded like the hammer of an old forge, steady, patient, inevitable. We reached Franklin close to midnight. The old garage Morrison Classic Motors stood dark and forgotten. The sign hung crooked paint, long faded. Eleanor stopped the car and cut the lights. I stepped out into the drizzle, stood in front of the rusted doors, and ran my fingers across the weathered nameplate. I thought it was dead, I whispered. No, she said softly. It's just waiting for someone to turn the power back on. Moonlight streamed through a cracked window, catching a crooked photo, still nailed to the wall, Grace and Ryan faces, smudged with oil, smiling like the world was simple. I stared for a long time. A drop of rain fell from the roof, splitting open on the concrete floor. And I finally understood. The paper I signed to save my wife's life was the same paper that cost me my home. A signature written in love turned into a weapon of betrayal. I turned to Eleanor. "You're right," I said quietly. "I didn't lose everything. I just found out what's worth keeping truth." She smiled faintly. "Trust once sold can't be bought back. But honor can be forged again with the same hands that once got burned." Dawn in Franklin doesn't sound like Nashville. There are no traffic lights, no city noise, only mist rolling over the fields and the faint clang of metal from somewhere inside the old garage. I stood there in the half-light, watching the sun push through the holes in the tin roof, the beams cutting across rusted steel frames like ghostly fingers. Eleanor was behind me, paper cup in hand, steam rising into the cold morning. "You can't fight them with anger, Jack," she said quietly. "You fight them with paperwork." I turned. "Paperwork's what they use to destroy me." She nodded once. "Then we'll use it to rebuild you." She handed me a business card, Mark Weston, attorney at law. "I trust him," she said, "and you need someone like that." Mark Weston arrived that afternoon. Mid-50s, tall glasses, the kind of man who'd seen too many lies collapse in front of him. His briefcase was worn, the edges scuffed like a veteran's boots. His voice was calm, patient, the kind that didn't rush to judge, only to uncover. We sat inside the old garage between half-built frames and dusty workbenches. Light streamed through a broken skylight, catching in the dust like fog. Mark opened his laptop. "I've gone through your financial history," he said. "There's a mortgage from 2019, $250,000. Borrower Jack Morrison. Collateral your house, 200 Morrison Road." I froze. "That's impossible. I never took a loan." He turned the screen toward me. "Signature matches yours. But here's the problem. The file includes a home repair authorization signed in 2015. That document was used as the legal basis for the mortgage. On the screen, I saw my own signature. Slanted, a little shaky, mine, no doubt. I remembered that day. Ryan told me it was just a permit for the construction crew to repair the roof. I signed, never thinking twice, because I trusted my son. Now I understood what that trust had cost. I looked at Mark. "I didn't sign for a bank," I said quietly. "I signed because I believed my son." He nodded, his tone flat but firm. "Trust without verification, Jack, is the most expensive loan there is. People think betrayal starts with a lie. But it doesn't. It starts with the first time you choose not to check because love convinces you not to look." Mark printed the files and spread them across the metal table. Side by side were copies of my authorization form and a transfer sheet from Morrison Auto Group to Riverfront Credit Union, the same bank Ryan used for his company. Mark pointed to a single line near the bottom, authorized signatory Jack Morrison. "You see that?" he said. "There's no evidence you ever signed it in person. All of this came through the company's internal system, which means someone scanned your signature." I took a slow breath. "One person could do that," I said. "Samantha." He met my eyes, steady, certain. Or someone following her orders. I lowered my head, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Just paper, but paper sharp enough to cut through everything that mattered. Eleanor stepped in, carrying 2 coffees. She looked at the documents, then at me. "Will that be enough to press charges?" "Not yet," Mark replied. "But it's enough to put their IPO on hold. If we prove you're a falsified shareholder, the whole deal freezes." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Good. I have contacts at the NASDAQ review board. They'll want to see this before it clears." I watched the two of them, her precise, determined. Him, calm, methodical. Both of them spoke the language of strategy and me. All I had left was memory, the memory of a son who used to call me Dad. Flashback. Nashville, 2017. I was showing Ryan how to rebuild a V8 block. He was laughing, hands covered in oil. "I get it now, Dad," he said. "Anything can be fixed if you know how." I patted his shoulder. "Except trust, son. Once it breaks, you can't just replace a piston." He laughed then, but now that sound haunted me like a warning I'd ignored. That evening after Mark left, Eleanor stayed behind to help organize the files. The neon light flickered over the workbench, casting shadows on an old photo of Grace and me. She glanced at it. "You've kept everything the same," she said softly. "I don't know any other way to live," I replied. She smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why they mistook your kindness for weakness." I looked out the window, headlights cutting across the dark road. "Weakness isn't being betrayed," I said. "It's still believing they might change." Near midnight, the phone rang. It was Mark. "Jack," he said, "I sent you an email, open it." I turned on the laptop. A spreadsheet appeared, detailed, clean. At the bottom, one small note: loan reference 1927. Extension granted 2023. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means someone extended the loan 3 months ago," Mark said. "Using your signature." I didn't answer. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks in the wall. Rain hit the tin roof like the ticking of a clock running out. They were still using my name, even now, even after throwing me out. There are debts that never show up on paper. Debts of trust. Debts of justice. And right now I owed both. I opened the garage door. Cold air swept in, carrying the smell of rain and rust. The old Mustang 67 sat in the corner, covered in a thick blanket of dust, like a shroud over memory. I ran my hand over the hood. The metal was cold, lifeless. "No revenge," I whispered. "I just want the truth to start again, like an engine that's been waiting for years." Behind me, Eleanor said nothing. Outside, the wind sounded like a motor turning over slowly, stubbornly refusing to die. She asked softly, "So what's next, Jack?" I looked toward the road. My eyes were dry now. "The next step," I said, "is to reopen every record. Not to win back a house, but to clear my name from what they've stained." I turned the key in the Mustang's ignition. The engine roared to life, a deep, guttural sound that shook the dust off the beams. For the first time in 6 years, the air smelled like oil and motion again. That sound filled the room, not like nostalgia, but like resurrection. A man's silence can die, but his honor that's just waiting to be restarted. That morning, Franklin looked like weathered steel. No sunlight, just a thick layer of fog clinging to the windows, as if the whole town had been draped in mourning cloth. The old garage sat silent, smelling of oil and time, that particular scent of places where the past refused to die quietly. Eleanor and I started clearing it out. Toolboxes stacked high dust, thick as history. "You should go through everything," she said. "Sometimes the past leaves clues we were too hurt to see." I gave a faint smile. "I've forgotten a lot, Eleanor. But maybe the worst thing I forgot was who I used to trust." We opened each box, one by one. Every item was a memory. A rusted wrench, a wire cutter, a roll of tape still marked with oil, and then a yellow envelope half hidden under a pile of tools. Its edges were brittle, the paper tinged with the color of old smoke. On the corner, handwriting I knew by heart for Jack, but not yet. I froze. Grace's handwriting. the script I hadn't seen in 9 long years. I sat down. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet, the ink faded, but her voice still alive in every curve. If one day Ryan forgets where he came from, don't hate him. Just remind him with what you once taught. Grace, April 2013. I read it again and again. Each word pierced deeper like a soft blade wrapped in love. Outside wind whispered through the cracks, sounding like someone quietly speaking from another time. I looked up. Grace's photo hung crooked on the wall, a thin coat of dust veiling her smile. And I understood. She had seen it all coming, long before I ever noticed. Eleanor didn't speak. She just placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. I didn't cry. There were no tears left for the things that should have been protected by reason. When I folded the letter, Eleanor reached into her leather bag and pulled out a thin folder. "There's something else you should see," she said. She laid it on the metal table and opened the first page. Grace Morrison, Vanderbilt University Medical Center, 2014. I leaned forward, reading the doctor's notes in neat handwriting. Patient expresses concern over her son's mental state. Fears he may be financially manipulated by his future spouse, leading to loss of independent judgment. My fingers tightened, not from shock, but from the way every missing piece suddenly fell into place. Grace had told them. She'd seen it all, before Samantha even stepped through my door. Eleanor said softly she warned her doctor, even wrote him a personal letter asking that if anything happened to Ryan, they should inform you. I clenched my jaw, and they didn't. She passed before it could ever become a legal matter. The paper crinkled under my hands. I couldn't tell if I was angry at Grace for keeping silent or at myself for refusing to listen to what was right in front of me. They say strong men don't cry. But that's not true. We just learn how to cry on the inside by clenching our fists until the blood stops moving. I stepped outside. The rain had started again, light drops tapping against the tin roof, falling through a rusted hole with a rhythm, steady as a heartbeat from long ago. Eleanor joined me under the awning. "You know what hurts the most?" I asked. She shook her head. What that she believed I'd understand one day. But I never did. Her eyes softened. "Jack, no one sees the shadows when they're living in someone else's light." Her words hit harder than I wanted to admit, because it was true. I'd spent my life in Grace's light, a woman so kind, she couldn't see how much the world had changed around her. And neither could I. Eleanor went back inside to gather the papers. Her voice was calm but sure. "It's time, Jack. You should reopen the Morrison Auto Group files." I turned to her. "You're certain?" She nodded. "Mark can file it legally. If your name's still listed as a founding shareholder, you can demand a full audit." I hesitated. "I left that company 9 years ago, Eleanor. They'll call me the past." She smiled faintly. "Even the past can restart if you know how to turn the key." A drop of water slipped from the roof, landing on the back of my hand. It spread like a stain, cool and real. In my head, Grace's voice returned, soft, steady, patient. "Just remind him with what you once taught." What had I taught Ryan? That a car could come back to life after years of silence. That every machine had a soul if someone cared enough to fix it. And maybe now it was my turn to repair the life I'd left behind. That night, Mark Weston came by again. He set his laptop on the table, his voice deliberate. "If you agree, I'll request an audit of Morrison Auto Group. But you need to be prepared for the backlash." "What kind of backlash?" I asked. He looked at me over his glasses. They'll try to bury you again, Jack. But this time they'll find the ground's not soft anymore. I glanced at Eleanor. She nodded once, like someone who had been waiting for this fight for a long time. I took a deep breath, placed Grace's letter gently on the table, and said, "Then let's begin. No more believing without verifying." Mark logged into the state's business registry. The blue light from the screen reflected across our faces. The first name on the shareholder record appeared Jack Morrison, founding partner, Morrison Classic Motors, merged 2015. My heart pounded. I had never left the company. I had only been erased. The dead don't stay silent. They wait for us to listen. And that night, in the rain-soaked quiet of Franklin, I finally did. Through the whisper of wet wind and the turning of old pages, I could almost hear Grace's voice again, not crying, not warning, but guiding. Honor doesn't die. It just waits for someone brave enough to start the engine again. Nashville had begun to turn cold, the kind of cold that didn't come from weather, but from the moment you realized you could no longer trust anyone. I sat in the back room of the old garage, the glow of a laptop, the only light left in the dark. Across from me, Mark Weston leaned over the keyboard, his glasses catching reflections of spreadsheets, account numbers, and buried emails inside Morrison Auto Group's internal servers. Eleanor stood behind him, arms crossed, her expression calm but cutting the look of someone who'd spent her life winning quiet wars no one ever saw. I said nothing. For the first time, I understood that not all battles were fought with fists, some were fought with data. In this age, Mark said softly, people don't need knives to kill a man. Just an email, a number, and a good story to make the world believe he's insane. He didn't look up from the screen. "Jack, I've been tracing internal transactions linked to Ryan's corporate accounts. There's a suspicious transfer, $280,000, to an auxiliary account labeled S. Morrison Consulting." My stomach tightened. "Samantha?" Mark nodded. "Exactly. But that's not the worst part." He opened another window. The screen filled with digital trails, rows of data, each line colder than the last. Transfer $280,000 from Morrison Auto Group to Samantha Morrison, then to Bayshore Condominiums, Miami, Florida. He enlarged the purchase file. Property owner Cole Benson. I didn't need to ask. The name hit like a wrench to the chest the young trainer Samantha once called her personal coach. I said nothing, because sometimes silence is the loudest proof of all. Eleanor set her coffee down, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. She used company money to buy a condo for her lover. If this goes public, Morrison Auto Group collapses overnight. Mark continued, and worse, those funds came from the $250,000 loan registered under your name. On paper. Jack, you paid for that condo. My fingers dug into the wooden armrest. The chair creaked, splintering under the weight of anger. "She didn't kill me," I said quietly. "But she wanted the world to believe I'd already lost my mind." Flashback. June 2020. Samantha once brought me a bottle of vitamins. She smiled sweetly. "Doctor says they'll help your memory." I laughed, trusting her. Now, as Mark scrolled through her emails, I saw what those smiles were worth. Subject: need guidance. How to prove mild cognitive decline in an elderly family member. Sender: Samantha Morrison, managing partner, Morrison Auto Group PR. Mark turned the screen toward me. "She was preparing legal groundwork, Jack. If she could establish cognitive decline, every past signature of yours becomes valid. That means she wouldn't need me," I finished. "Only my name." Eleanor's brow furrowed. They were almost done. Another few weeks and you'd have been erased legally, not just personally. I met her eyes. If it weren't for you, I'd have never known. She shook her head. You would have known Jack. Just too late. That night, Eleanor sat beside Mark, her focus unbroken as they examined transaction chains. I have an idea, she said. If they're using corporate law as a shield, we'll use it as a weapon. Mark paused. Explain. Heritage Restorations can buy out Morrison Auto Group's bad debt, she said. I've got the capital. It's perfectly legal. We'll file it as a distressed asset acquisition. Mark considered it for a moment, then nodded slowly. It's legal. Hedge funds do it every day. I didn't understand all the technicalities, but I understood one thing: I was witnessing the first move in a new kind of war. Eleanor turned to me, her tone deliberate and clear. If I control the debt, I'll have a seat at the shareholders' table. Then you can reappear as the founding partner they tried to erase. Her eyes reflected the light from the screen. We won't fight them with rage, Jack. We'll fight with precision, cold, clean, lawful. How much are you investing? I asked. 450,000, she said simply. I hesitated. That's a lot of money. She gave a half smile. Justice has a price. I just prefer paying with cash instead of blood. Mark finished the extraction, then plugged in a small USB drive. We have the transfers, the emails, and the forged authorizations. I'll create 3 copies, one for my office, one sealed with my partner, and one for you. He handed me the flash drive. It was small, light, but it felt like holding a loaded gun. Inside it wasn't just evidence. It was the last piece of my dignity. Eleanor's voice dropped soft but steady. Justice isn't loud, Jack. It starts quietly, like an engine warming up. I didn't respond. I walked toward the old Mustang 67 in the corner. Its metal was cold beneath my hands, but the weight of it felt alive again. For the first time in years, I remembered what patience could sound like. The silence before ignition, the slow hum of something that refuses to die. Justice, I said quietly, doesn't start with shouting. It starts with patience, oil metal, and every deliberate turn of a wrench. Outside, rain drummed softly on the roof. Eleanor slipped on her coat. Tomorrow I'll file the purchase documents, she said. Mark will prepare the shareholder authorization. They'll know, I said. She nodded. They'll know Jack, but only when it's too late. After they left, I stayed alone in the dim light. Grace's photograph sat on the shelf, a smile forever frozen in sepia. I held a cold cup of coffee, staring out the window at the quiet streets of Franklin, asleep under rain. She tried to make the world think I'd forgotten. I whispered. But she doesn't understand. A mechanic never forgets the bolts he's tightened. He remembers each one by sound, by feel, by heart. And once he finds the right key, he can make anything run again. I opened the metal cabinet, placed the USB drive inside a tin box, and labeled it with a black marker, Grace's proof. Then I locked it, dialing the numbers, 1 to 967, the year the first Mustang roared to life. Some engines don't die. They wait. And once they start, nothing can stop them. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't scream or shine. It hums low, patient, inevitable. And once it catches spark, the whole night listens. They say when a betrayer invites you to dinner, you should go. But never go empty-handed. I brought an envelope. No money, no apology, only proof. Rain fell over Nashville that evening, a thin silver mist wrapping the city like unfinished business. I parked the old pickup in front of Le Rivage, the kind of restaurant where people pretend their lives are perfect, as long as the lighting is soft enough. Inside, everything gleamed, gold light spilling over wine glasses, cutlery chiming like music only liars could dance to. I straightened my tie. Gray suit, worn shoes. Not elegant, just honest. I wasn't there to make peace. I was there to end something. Ryan and Samantha were already seated. They looked like a magazine spread, smiling at the right angle, wearing the right shades of success, speaking rehearsed lines that had forgotten what truth sounded like. "Dad." "You made it," Ryan said. His smile strained, brittle as glass. Samantha tilted her head, her voice smooth, her eyes sharper than the knives on the table. "We just wanted to clear the air. Families shouldn't let misunderstandings linger." I sat down, said nothing, just placed the yellow envelope on the table softly, but with the weight of a lifetime. The sound it made was small, yet it froze both of them mid-breath. The waiter poured the wine. I stared into the red, the color of memory, the color of what once was alive. Grace's hands had once trembled over a glass like that on her final birthday. She'd said, "If you ever have to fight Jack, fight in silence. Noise only makes people forget why you started." Now I understood. Samantha began. "Mr. Morrison," she said sweetly, "we all know things may have gone too far, but we don't want anyone to get hurt. The company's going public soon, and you know how the media loves a scandal." She stopped when I pushed the envelope toward her. Inside, a printed email to the psychiatrist, a $280,000 transfer, and a condo deed in Miami under the name Cole Benson. Ryan opened it. Each page sounded like a blade flipping open. Samantha didn't flinch. She just looked at me, eyes cold, smiling like she was looking down at a grave she'd already dug. "Who's going to believe this?" she said softly. "A senile old man who signed the wrong papers, who let his company slip through his fingers. No one believes you, Jack. Your time's over." I stared at her, then said slowly, "Maybe. But my granddaughter believes me." Silence. The light shimmered across the wine red, rippling like old blood. Then a small voice broke the air. "Grandpa," I turned. Emily was standing near the table, white dress hair tied back, holding something crumpled in her hands. Ryan stood up. "Emily, what are you doing here?" "Who?" She ignored him. Walked straight to me. "I saw you here, Grandpa. I brought you something." She handed me a torn photograph. A family picture from 2014, me, Grace, Ryan, Samantha, and little Emily. It had been ripped clean down the middle. The tear split me from the rest. But someone, probably her, had taped it back together with clear tape. The seams were visible, but the picture was whole again. I stared at it for a long time. The edges blurred through my vision. There are things I said quietly that even when torn apart, still find a way to mend. But the scars will always remind us where the break was. Ryan's jaw tightened. "Emily, go back to your table. Now." She shook her head. "No. I want to stay with Grandpa." Then she looked at me, her voice small but certain. "Mom said you don't remember much anymore. But you still remember I liked sitting in your Mustang, right?" I smiled through the ache. "Yes. And I remember you asked why old cars look better than new ones." Her eyes lit up. "You said it's because old cars have souls." No one spoke after that. The silence was too full. Only the faint clink of silverware echoed the sound of masks cracking. Samantha leaned back and her voice tightening. "Children don't understand adult matters." I looked at her. Children don't lie. That's the difference. Ryan slammed his glass onto the table. Dad, you're destroying this family over some meaningless pride. I stayed calm. No. I'm reminding you that pride isn't the enemy of love. It's the shield of integrity. And integrity, I paused, is the only thing left when everything else is gone. Samantha gave a low laugh. Always the righteous man. What do you want, Jack? Money, recognition? I met her gaze, my voice low even. I want to hear the engine of truth again. Not loud, just steady, like the heartbeat of a man who never bowed. The waiter appeared beside me. Sir, would you care for dessert? I stood. No, I'm full of lies. I picked up the photo from Emily's hand, folded it gently, and knelt to her level. Thank you, sweetheart, I said softly. You did something brave tonight. You fixed what they tore. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. I could hear Ryan calling after me. Dad, wait. But I didn't turn back. Because explanations mean nothing to people who traded truth for comfort. I opened the Mustang door, the leather creaking like memory. The engine roared alive, deep and sure, the sound of something honest, refusing to die. In the mirror, Ryan stood there drenched under the neon sign of Le Rivage. He looked young but already hollowed out. On the drive home, I stopped by the gas station overlooking the lake. The night was quiet. Only the reflection of neon lights shimmered across the dark water. I pulled out the photograph again. Under the taped seam in messy child's handwriting, Emily had written, "Family can be fixed." I held the picture, smiling faintly, the kind of smile that comes not from joy, but from recognition. This fight had changed. It was no longer me against them. It was truth against forgetting. And for the first time in years, truth had a witness. In the finest rooms, I thought people bury the truth beneath wine and polite words. But sometimes it takes a child with a piece of tape to make the cracks visible again. Because justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from the smallest act of belief that refuses to die. Nothing makes a liar panic more than the sight of their victim still standing. And nothing makes guilt sharper than silence that refuses to break. I learned that lesson a few weeks after the so-called family dinner. That morning, a mail carrier knocked on the door of my old garage. He wore a raincoat, slick with drizzle, a red sealed envelope in his hand. "Mr. Morrison," he asked. "From the Davidson County Court." I signed for it, tore the seal. The first line screamed in bold type, "Restraining order, alleged harassment and threats." I laughed once hollow. Samantha had filed it. The woman who once tried to convince the world I was senile now wanted the court to believe I was dangerous. It wasn't the accusation that hurt. It was the way she used it, like a wrench turned slowly tightening the screws of greed. Mark Weston arrived within the hour, his calm more unnerving than rage. He read the papers, eyes narrow behind his glasses. "This is strategy," he said flatly. "They're trying to muzzle you before the IPO goes through. If you react publicly, they'll paint you as the unstable old man." I looked around the garage. The Mustang sat beneath its canvas cover, silent, coiled, waiting. "So what do we do?" I asked. He closed the folder. "Nothing. Sometimes the only way to win is to let them fire the first shot." Davidson County Courthouse. A small hearing room, cold, fluorescent light. Samantha sat beside her attorney wearing a black dress. Her expression rehearsed the victim in a cheap courtroom drama. Ryan sat next to her, face drawn, pride clinging to him like a wrinkled suit. The judge looked up. "Mr. Morrison, do you wish to represent yourself?" Mark stood. "No, Your Honor. I'll handle this." He opened his laptop. The screen glowed across the walls. Video footage filled the room, the dinner at Le Rivage. Samantha's voice rang clear. No one will believe an old man with memory issues. No threats, no violence. Just truth, cold, sharp, undeniable. The courtroom went still. Samantha's chin dropped. Color drained from her face. The judge nodded once. No evidence of harassment. The restraining order is denied. I didn't look at her. I buttoned my jacket and walked out. Behind me, I heard Mark's low voice. Sometimes winning means nothing more than letting them realize they've already lost. I thought that would be the end of it. But secrets like motor oil spread fast once they start to leak. 3 days later, the Nashville Ledger broke the headline "Fraud Behind Morrison Auto IPO Inside Story." Front page. Byline Kelly Sanders. The article quoted internal emails detailing illegal fund transfers through PR subsidiary accounts. At the bottom, one line in italics: source internal whistleblower. Mark printed the story and placed it on my desk. "Guess who sent it?" he said. I frowned. "Cole Benson." He nodded. She cut him off. He retaliated. I looked at the photo accompanying the piece, Samantha's face cropped beside the company logo. The headline screamed across the top: beauty, lies, money. Sometimes justice doesn't come from saints. It comes from the betrayed, just angry enough to tell the truth. That morning, Morrison Auto Group turned into a hornet's nest. Employees crowded around phones. Reporters camped at the gate. Flashbulbs flickered against the glass facade. Ryan stepped outside, pale jaw trembling beneath the cameras. I was there with Mark, watching from the sidewalk. He spotted me. His eyes, bloodshot from sleepless nights, locked on mine. "You proud of yourself?" he shouted. "You just destroyed my career." His voice cracked through the air like metal scraping against glass. I walked closer, slow and steady. "No, Ryan," I said. "You destroyed it the day you mortgaged my name for your ambition." He clenched a wrench in his hand, lifting it halfway, but the tremor in his wrist stopped him. He froze between fury and guilt. Then Samantha appeared, hair disheveled, makeup running, reporters firing flashes like gunshots. "Don't you dare blame me," she snapped. "Everything I did was for this company." Ryan spun on her, shouting, "For the company or for him?" The word "him" hung in the air, and everyone knew he meant Cole Benson. Samantha's mouth fell open. A beat later, she slapped him. The crack echoed across the lot. Ryan's cheek flamed red. The crowd fell silent. Only the staccato burst of camera shutters broke the air. And in that blinding light, the perfect family mask finally shattered. I didn't feel triumph or vengeance. Only silence, a stillness heavy enough to end a storm. People think revenge means watching your enemy fall. But real revenge is when you no longer need to watch. Mark touched my shoulder. "Let's go, Jack," he said softly. I nodded and turned away. Behind me, the Morrison Auto Group sign gleamed in the afternoon sun, bright, hollow, like pride running on fumes. That night I went home, turned on the television. The screen was filled with their faces, Ryan and Samantha flashing on every financial segment. The banner read, "Morrison Auto Faces Insider Fraud Investigation." The anchor's voice was calm, surgical. "Trading is expected to be suspended. Sources confirm founder Jack Morrison, father of the CEO, is cooperating with investigators." I clicked the TV off, sat in the dark. On the table beside me lay the photo Emily had mended. The clear tape still caught the lamplight, a reminder that even broken things can hold together. The price of truth isn't pain, it's solitude. Because only when you stand alone can you finally hear the sound of your conscience. The phone rang. Eleanor. Her voice was calm, but beneath it steel. "The story's out, Jack. They'll try to blame you, but I sent our financial files to the SEC 3 days ago. They're cornered now. I closed my eyes, leaned back, listened to the rain tapping the tin roof above me, the sound of metal cooling after the forge. Some explosions don't come from gunpowder. They come from truths held too long. And when they finally detonate, no one hears their own excuses anymore. Justice is never alone. It only waits for the brave to sign their names. And sometimes those people are the very ones you thought were gone for good. 3 weeks after the IPO collapsed, Nashville began to settle down again, at least for everyone else. But on the south side, inside a small garage on Gallatin Pike, the lights still burned past midnight. I stood outside for a moment, watching through the fogged window. Inside, Tom Riley was half bent beneath a car, arms slick with oil, the same stance he'd had 30 years ago. "Still got strength in those old arms?" I asked, stepping in. He looked up, beard streaked with silver, grinning through the smoke of a half-dead cigarette. "If the engine still runs, so do I," he rasped. Then his grin faded. "Word is, you're about to take down your whole family." "Jack," I met his eyes. "Not my family," I said quietly. "Just the people who used its name." In the corner sat a circle of men around a wooden table, the Mechanic Veterans Club. Once upon a time, we'd all rebuilt cars together when Reagan was still in office, and our pride came from calloused hands. Life had scattered them, divorces, layoffs, bad backs, lost wars. But tonight, they'd all returned. Not to drink, to do what was right one last time. Tom pulled a cloth off the table, revealing a thick, weathered folder. The paper had yellowed at the edges. Stamped on the cover, Morrison Classic Motors, 2014 contract copy. Under the flickering neon, the raised seal glinted like a scar forged in steel. I touched the paper, tracing the familiar curve of a signature, Jack Morrison, founder. It was nothing like the version Samantha had filed in court, the forged one, with a neatly added clause titled Trustee Transfer. "Where did you get this?" I asked. Tom's grin returned, weary but proud. "Didn't get it, Jack. It never left. When you cleared the shop back in 2015, Grace asked me to hang on to some paperwork. Guess it turned out to be more than sentimental." I looked down again. A smudge of engine grease ran beside the ink. That mark, it wasn't just evidence. It was proof that once honor still had fingerprints. A younger man across the table shifted nervously. Ben Holloway. He hadn't spoken all night. Now his hands trembled as he stood. "I have something to say." The room fell still. Even the radio in the corner went silent. Ben pulled a folded page from his jacket, set it on the table. "I sold internal data from Morrison Auto Group to Ryan," he said. $5,000. I thought it was just a client list. Didn't realize he used it to fake part of the IPO report." No one moved. Tom lit another cigarette. The match hissed. Smoke curled around his words. "Ben," he growled, "you used to work with your hands like the rest of us. Now you work with lies." Ben swallowed hard, eyes burning with shame. "I know. I can't fix what I did. But I'll testify. I don't want to carry this to my grave." I studied his face, sweat, fear, and something else, the faint light of a man deciding to be clean again. I'd seen that look before. In Ryan long ago, right before he chose ambition instead. "Some men keep their honor by staying silent," I said quietly. "Others earn it back by speaking up. Either way, the cost is blood." We stayed for 3 hours. Tom cross-checked the signatures line by line. Ben plugged in a USB he'd hidden for 4 years, the screen filled with lines of emails and transactions. "Move the assets. Keep it under vendor expansion." Tom exhaled a long breath, ash falling onto the floor like snow. "That's enough," he said. If any of us still have a conscience, we send this to someone who can hit them where it hurts the law. That night I called Eleanor Brooks. Her office window glowed over the Nashville skyline, the reflection of a woman who'd seen too many scandals and stopped flinching at the sight of one more. "Jack," she said, voice steady, "if I file these documents under my real name, the press will scream, 'Revenge from the old flame.' I won't give them that headline. I'll file under a pseudonym. Brooks." I hesitated. "You're not afraid?" She laughed softly without joy. "Fear is how corruption breathes, Jack. The moment you stay silent out of fear, you've already signed your consent." I heard her typing the firm, deliberate rhythm of a woman who never missed a key. Then a single, clean click in her. "It's sent," she said. "One copy to the Tennessee State Court, one to the SEC. The storm's coming." The next evening, Tom called a meeting at the club. 7 men showed up, all in faded blue coveralls, each carrying the weight of their own years. No one talked about cars, just truth. Tom stood clearing his throat. "The original contract will be notarized again. Ben will testify. The rest of us, we back them no matter what happens." Then he turned to me. "Jack, you better get ready. This wave's gonna be big." I smiled, tired but steady. I've lived through a war, 2 recessions, and a lifetime of betrayal. One more wave won't drown me. That night I went back to my own garage. The streetlight outside cast a dull glow over the tarp covering the old Mustang. I pulled the cover off, sat behind the wheel. The dashboard lights blinked weakly, the fuel gauge stuck right in the middle. Like my life. Not full, not empty. Just enough to keep moving. From the glove box, I took out Emily's mended photo. The tape shimmered faintly under the light. Sometimes I whispered, "Adults have to learn what you already know, sweetheart. How to tape the truth back together." The next morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A man's voice, low and rough. "Mr. Morrison. You should stop. We know where your granddaughter goes to school." My hand tightened on the phone. No fear, no shaking. Just the kind of calm that comes when there's nothing left to lose but what's right. "I expected this," I said slowly. "But if you touch Emily, I won't send the evidence to the court. I'll send it to the press. And when I do, there won't be a place left for you to hide." Silence. Then the line went dead. I called Mark. "You were right," I said. "Justice doesn't have to shout. But this time, I'll make sure it's heard." Mark's voice was quiet. "Good. The SEC just confirmed the investigation's open." I stood in the garage doorway. Morning light cut through the dust, landing on the Mustang's hood, a thin stripe of brightness like the tape line on Emily's photograph. I closed my eyes. My voice steady as an engine's hum. Justice was never meant to stand alone. It only waits for those brave enough to sign their names. And when hands once stained with oil lift their hammers again, there isn't a wall truth can't break through. "They can call us old, outdated, obsolete," I murmured. "But they forget old steel doesn't rust. It just needs the right heat to burn bright again." I've heard engines roar all my life, but no sound ever felt colder or more final than the strike of a judge's gavel. 3 times, 3 echoes, a lifetime sealed between them. Morning hung over Nashville like steel. No birds, just a thin April chill threading through gray air. I walked toward the Tennessee Civil Court, each footstep scraping against the marble steps, as if dragging every year behind me. Outside, the press swarmed. Camera lights flickered like flash grenades. Across the courthouse banner, Morrison Auto Group fraud case. I heard a reporter whisper, That's him, Jack Morrison. The father his own son betrayed. I didn't stop. The old black shoes clicked against stone, each step measured deliberate heavy. Inside the courtroom, the light was surgical, white sharp, unforgiving. To my left sat Samantha. Black suit, immaculate makeup, but her hand trembled where it rested on the table. Beside her, Ryan. Eyes hollow, shoulders slumped. No trace of the confident CEO, just a son who'd run out of excuses. Behind them, Eleanor and Tom sat quietly. And beside me, Mark Weston. Calm, precise. Each document before him lined up like a loaded chamber. Then the judge entered. Charles Walters, 20 years on the bench, voice clipped and cool. The case of Morrison Auto Group versus State of Tennessee will now proceed. Some days you don't seek justice to win. You seek it to prove that honor isn't extinct. Mark stood, his voice low, deliberate, with the weight of someone who's seen too much corruption to be impressed by it. Your Honor, this case isn't just about money. It's about truth. We present evidence that Mrs. Samantha Morrison falsified documents to seize corporate control and assets belonging to Mr. Jack Morrison, founder of Morrison Classic Motors. He lifted the original 2014 contract, the one Tom Riley and the Mechanic Veterans Club had safeguarded for nearly a decade. The raised seal caught the courtroom lights. My signature glistened clear, deliberate, utterly different from the fake one Samantha had filed. Mark laid it down, then continued. This, along with verified bank statements, shows a transfer of $280,000 from company accounts to Mrs. Morrison's personal fund, later used to purchase real estate in Miami, Florida. Samantha shot to her feet. That was an investment. Jack gave me permission. I have the authorization form. Mark didn't argue. He simply pushed another document across the table. A forged medical power of attorney, created using a 2015 template containing scanned signatures lifted from hospital records belonging to the late Grace Morrison. A collective gasp. Even the hum of the courtroom lights seemed to falter. Samantha's face drained of color. Ryan looked down, his hands locked together like he was praying for time to rewind. People can forge a signature. They can fake loyalty. But they can't fake the look in their eyes when truth finally stands before them. Judge Walters tapped his gavel lightly. Order. Proceed. Mark nodded once, then spoke again, and finally, Your Honor, this evidence wasn't found by lawyers. It was found by men who once worked with Mr. Morrison mechanics, not bankers. Alongside the contract, they discovered a CD, recorded 11 years ago. He held it up, a plain silver disc with a handwritten label, Grace Morrison, 2013. Samantha scoffed. This is a courtroom, not a memorial service. Mark met her eyes. His voice was gentle, almost kind. Sometimes, Mrs. Morrison, the dead are the only ones left who tell the truth. He placed the CD into the player. Static crackled. Then a woman's voice filled the room. Soft, warm, trembling with time. Ryan, if you ever forget what's right, listen to your father's hammer. Every strike is a reminder honor never retires. The voice faded. Silence fell. Heavy, sacred. No one moved. No one breathed. Ryan buried his face in his hands. Samantha's eyes darted between the walls, searching for a way out that didn't exist. I just sat there motionless, until I realized the wetness on my cheek wasn't sweat. The judge adjusted his glasses. His tone softened. This recording holds no legal standing, but it carries moral weight, and this court still believes in morality. Then came the gavel. The court finds Mrs. Samantha Morrison guilty of document forgery under Section 13 Tennessee Civil Code. Sentenced 12 months probation and 300 hours of community service at the Nashville Auto Recovery Center, a facility founded by Mr. Jack Morrison. The sound of that judgment hit harder than any hammer I'd ever swung. Samantha collapsed into her chair. Ryan's eyes brimmed red. He whispered, barely audible, "Dad, I'm sorry." I didn't answer. Not because I refused forgiveness, but because some apologies must be paid in deeds, not tears. Eleanor approached, resting her hand gently on my shoulder. "Grace won with you today," she said softly. I turned, shook my head. "No, Eleanor. Grace didn't win. She just reminded me how to lose with dignity. Justice isn't victory. It's the moment you dare to face everything and realize that what's right may come late but never dead." By afternoon, the sky turned iron gray. Rain gathered over Nashville like a curtain call. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps. Flashes burst in the rain. Ryan walked out first, silent, hollow. Then Samantha, flanked by officers. A gust of wind tore the community service order from her hand. The paper spiraled upward, fluttering like a white flag that had lost its meaning, and landed at my feet. I bent down, folded it once, and slipped it into my coat pocket. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that justice always leaves ashes behind. That evening I returned to the garage. The walls glowed dim beneath a single yellow bulb. Old photographs lined the pegboard faces, half-faded memories sealed in dust. The Mustang waited, still patient, still proud. I sat at the old workbench, lifted the CD player, and pressed play. The static whispered again, then Grace's voice one last time. "And if someday you listen again, remember, honor needs repair too, like an engine, as long as the mechanic still has a heart." The tape clicked to silence. I sat there for a long while, watching the lamplight shimmer across the car's hood, like the reflection of time itself. Every gavel, every verdict, every tear is just life teaching us how to listen to the voices we thought were gone. My phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. The news broke. "They're calling you the mechanic who brought justice back to Nashville." I stared at the screen. Smiled faintly. Not proud, just peaceful. Because somewhere I knew Grace was listening too. Justice doesn't live inside verdicts. It lives inside the voices we thought were silenced. And sometimes those voices return not to end a story, but to remind us that honor still breathes. I once believed that when justice arrived, it would shine like sunlight after a storm. But it doesn't. When justice finally comes, the first thing it destroys is the illusion of permanence. 3 days after the verdict, Nashville drowned in headlines about the Morrison family. Every outlet called it the same thing: the fall of a legacy. The collapse of an empire that began in a small garage on the industrial south side of the city. On the business channels, Ryan's face filled the screens. Former CEO Ryan Morrison resigns. After fraud verdict. I watched, but there was no satisfaction. Just a hollow ache, like the sound of metal cooling after fire. Ryan was forced out as CEO. The board demanded he sell 30% of his shares to repay $1.2 million in damages. Morrison Auto Group rebranded itself as Nashville Automotive Holdings, as if a fresh coat of paint could cover rot. But everyone in the industry knew you can't erase a name like Morrison. It lingered like oil stains in every bolt, every news story, every whispered conversation. Samantha's fate was different. The media followed her daily as she served her community sentence at Nashville Auto Recovery Center, the workshop I'd founded decades ago. Blue uniform, grease-stained gloves, hair tied back. The same woman who once rode in black SUVs and wore handbags worth more than an engine now crouched beneath rusted car frames. A reporter asked her, "Do you regret what you did?" She said nothing. But when she looked up at the camera for the first time, I saw the real her, not the actress, not the strategist, just a human being, stripped bare, exhausted, and undone. No one escapes karma. It just comes slow like an old engine after winter. But when it starts, it burns through everything false. One morning, a letter arrived from the bank. The envelope was thick, stamped official. Inside, a certificate of ownership. Morrison Classic Motors. Property title. The courier said quietly, "They asked me to return this to you, sir. By court order. They said, it used to be yours, and now it is again." I opened the document. My name was printed in blue ink, owner Jack Morrison. The ink blurred at the edges. It took me a moment to realize why I was crying. That garage, the one where Grace used to brew coffee each morning, where I taught Ryan to tighten his first bolt, stood empty now. Just the scent of rust and the echo of what time refused to give back. That afternoon, Eleanor arrived. Her charcoal gray suit was immaculate, a few silver strands falling across her forehead. She carried a stack of papers, set them gently on the table. It was the loan contract, the one she'd purchased, to keep the company from collapsing. "Now the choice is yours," she said softly. "I can void it, or you can use it to reclaim everything." I looked at her, my voice even slow. "I don't want to trample the ruins, Eleanor. I just want someone to learn how to stand again among them." She held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded. "Grace would be proud." I shook my head. I don't think Grace ever wanted revenge. She just wanted justice to find its way home. That night, Nashville rained. Thin, steady rain, the kind that feels like memory refusing to fade. I stayed late at the garage, wiping down the old Mustang. Grace used to call it the heart of the house. Then I heard the back door creak open. Ryan. He stood in the doorway, soaked through a bottle in his hand. Eyes red. Voice raw. "You still come here?" I said nothing. He looked around the garage, his shoulders shaking. "It's all gone, Dad. They sold the name, the company. The papers call me a fraud." He swallowed hard. "You happy now?" I put the rag down. Met his eyes. "No, Ryan. I was never trying to win against you." He laughed bitterly, sinking against the wall, pouring whiskey into a plastic cup. "Win, you didn't win, you destroyed me. You made everyone hate me. You took everything I stepped closer." My tone steady. "No, son, you did that yourself the day you traded honor for money." Ryan stared at me, empty, trembling. "Honor," he whispered. "You think honor pays bills?" I didn't answer. Only the rain replied, soft against the tin roof. Then I heard it, the Mustang's ignition clicking. Ryan had turned the key. The engine rumbled to life. White smoke began to curl through the air. The carbon monoxide thickened fast. My heart dropped. Ryan. I lunged forward, wrenched open the driver's door, pulled him out just as the fumes swallowed the room. We fell onto the wet pavement. Rain poured over us, washing away the smoke. Ryan coughed, gasping. "What are you doing?" I shouted. He choked on the rain. "I just wanted it all to stop." I grabbed his shoulders, voice shaking now. "No, Ryan. It stops when you're brave enough to live." He broke, collapsed in my arms, sobbing into the storm. Minutes later, the ambulance arrived. Paramedics lifted him inside. I climbed in after clothes still drenched. As the siren wailed, Ryan reached out, his fingers weak, trembling. "Dad, you saved me." Even after what I did to you, I looked at him, the boy he used to be, flickering behind those broken eyes. My voice came out low, rough, full. Because, son, I still have you. Tears spilled down his face, a mix of rain, regret, and something cleaner. Neither of us spoke again. Only the ambulance siren carried our silence through the night, cold, endless, true. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's how you stop the poison from spreading any further. It's how you let the past rest. By morning, the sky had cleared. Ryan was discharged from the hospital. I drove him home, not to his penthouse, but to the old house Grace once filled with lavender. The flowers were gone, but the earth still held their scent. I brewed coffee for two. We sat in silence for a while. Ryan looked around, his voice soft. I remember this place. Mom used to say when an engine stalls, you just clean the spark plugs. I nodded. She was right. When a person breaks down, you just clean the heart. He smiled faintly, eyes lowering. Dad, thank you. I shook my head. Don't thank me, son. Just don't repeat it. I rose, opened the garage door. Sunlight cut through the leftover mist, landing on the Mustang's polished hood. The engine hummed quietly, faithfully, like a promise still breathing. People think justice is an ending, but it isn't. It's a beginning of forgiveness, of learning to be decent again, of believing that even in ashes there's room left to plant the seeds of honor. People think that when the storm passes, the sky turns blue again. But what's left afterward are the broken pieces of yourself. And sometimes cleaning up those pieces takes just as much courage as surviving the storm itself. 2 months after the trial, Nashville was quieter. The news had moved on. The headlines, "The Fall of the Morrison Legacy," were replaced by politics, sports, and other noise pretending to matter more. But for me, the war wasn't over. Not because I still wanted revenge, but because Ryan still hadn't learned how to live. He'd left the luxury apartment downtown and moved back to the small house on the south side of the city, the one where Grace and I raised him. Every morning he'd wake before dawn, drink black coffee, no sugar, walk down to the old garage, look around for a while, then come home again. No one asked questions. None were needed. At night, I saw the light from the storage room, the one Grace used to keep old photos, papers, and tapes. Ryan spent hours in there, digging through boxes, like a man searching for his own heart. I didn't interrupt. I knew what he was really looking for, the version of himself he'd lost somewhere along the way. One morning, sunlight crept through the kitchen window as Ryan stepped out of that room holding a worn yellow envelope. Dad, I think Mom left this. The paper was soft with age, creased, the ink blurred. On the front, in his younger handwriting, "To Mom, 2015. He sat down at the wooden table, his fingers trembling as he opened it. Inside, one page. Yellowed, shaky pen strokes. You could tell it was written by a son who didn't yet know how to say the things that mattered. His voice cracked as he read aloud. Mom, I'm scared of losing her, but I'm more scared of disappointing Dad. I know he doesn't say it, but I see it, the look in his eyes when he realizes I'm not the man he raised. I'll fix it. I just don't know where to start. When he finished, he sat there for a long time. The only sounds were the clock ticking and the faint whistle of wind through the vent. Finally, Ryan whispered, I never sent this letter. Back then, I thought I was stronger than my feelings. He swallowed hard. Now I know I wasn't strong at all. I didn't say a word, just placed my hand on his shoulder. A simple gesture, but the first time in years a father's hand had rested on his son's. Not every forgiveness begins with words. Some start with silence long enough for two hearts to find the same rhythm again. The next morning, I went back to the garage. The old Mustang sat beneath its silver tarp, a fine layer of dust soft as ash. I pulled the cover back and began polishing the hood. Emily and Laura, my granddaughters, ran around me laughing, chasing the dust motes in the air. "Grandpa, can we help?" I smiled, handed Emily a small cloth. "Easy, sweetheart. She's old like me." They giggled. The sound of their laughter mixed with the scent of engine oil and sunshine. Light filtered through the tin roof, scattering across chrome and floor like tiny sparks of gold. And in that moment, I realized something: some cracks don't need fixing. They just need light. That afternoon, Ryan appeared at the doorway. No warning, no flowers, no apologies. Just the shape of him framed in sunlight, his shadow stretching long across the concrete. "Dad. Yeah, I just published something." He hesitated, holding out his phone. I took it. The screen showed a new post from the Nashville Chronicle. "My Father Built Engines and He Built Me," by Ryan Morrison. I began to read slowly, carefully, as if the words might shatter if rushed. "They say I was born among wrenches and hammers. They're right. But what my father truly built in me wasn't a trade, it was patience. The kind that keeps you standing when everything else falls apart. My father never needed to win. He only needed me to understand that honor isn't something you buy back. If he's reading this, I just want him to know I finally understand." When I finished, I closed the phone quietly, said nothing. Ryan waited, eyes unsure, like a boy waiting for a verdict. Then I nodded and said softly, "Grace would be proud." That night, I turned on Grace's old cassette player. The tape creaked to life, playing a faint, imperfect piano piece, Autumn Roads, recorded in 2013. The first notes stumbled. Then slowly, they found rhythm, as if the hands that played them were remembering how to trust again. Emily and Laura lay on the floor listening, their eyes wide, their breathing even. I closed mine, and for a moment she was there again. Grace. Her hands hovering over the keys, eyes soft behind the steam of morning coffee. The garage door opened quietly. Ryan stepped in. Dust on his shirt. Sweat on his forehead. "I heard the music," he said. I nodded without turning. "The car's almost ready." He smiled faintly, picking up a wrench from the bench. "Remember when I was 15 and dropped a wrench into the intake valve?" "Of course," I said. It sounded like thunder. "I thought you'd yell at me," he said, chuckling. "But you just said, 'Make one mistake loud enough and you'll remember it forever.'" I laughed softly. "And did you?" He looked down, eyes misted. "I forgot. Until now." We worked side by side again, father and son. The old rhythm returning, unspoken, effortless. I turned the key. A sputter. Then a clean, strong ignition. The Mustang roared awake. White smoke coiled upward, twisting through the golden light. The sound filled the garage, steady, warm, alive. Ryan stood beside me, hand resting on the hood, eyes fixed on the engine. "If you want to start over," I said quietly, "there's room for you here. In the garage." He didn't speak right away. Then he nodded. Voice soft but certain, "I want to." The engine growled deeper, as if answering for both of us. Through the haze of smoke, Eleanor appeared in the doorway, watching for a moment. She smiled a small, knowing smile and lifted her thumb in approval before leaving us to the noise and the light. Forgiveness doesn't change the past. It makes the present worth living again. Grace once said, "No one is truly gone if their name is still spoken with gratitude." And tonight, amid the scent of fuel and the hum of old metal, I knew we'd found that again. Later that night, I sat alone in the garage. Ryan had gone home. Emily and Laura were asleep. I pressed play once more. Grace's piano filled the air, fragile but full. Outside, wind whispered through the eaves like someone breathing softly after a long cry. I looked up at the wall. There it was, the old rusted sign, Morrison Classic Motors, since 1982. I reached up, wiped away the dust. Beneath it, the silver paint still shone. The metal caught the light, casting a faint reflection back at me. I smiled, not out of joy, but out of recognition. You can't repair everything, but you can choose not to throw it away. Because some things aren't made to be perfect, they're made to be kept. Like honor, like family, and like the sound of an engine that never truly stops. 1 year later. Nashville had changed. A new bridge now arched across the Cumberland River, its lights glittering on the water at night like streaks of oil floating on steel. People called it the Bridge of Renewal. They said it symbolized a city learning to stand again. To me, it meant something simpler, that everything can be fixed if the mechanic has enough patience. I had finally retired for good. Morrison Classic Motors no longer ran as a business, but as a small vocational workshop, a place where veterans and young apprentices came to learn the craft of restoring old cars. As for me, I'd accepted a part-time role as a technical consultant for Heritage Restoration's Eleanor Brooks's company. We didn't talk about revenge anymore, or loss, or pain. We both understood the truth. Now the past is cold metal. Hit it too long and it breaks. But heat it gently and it can shine again. One afternoon, I was reviewing blueprints for a 1950 Cadillac restoration when the phone rang. It was Eleanor's assistant voice, panicked Mr. Morrison. Ms. Brooks collapsed during a contract signing in Atlanta. The doctors said she needs to rest for a few months. I set the pen down, looked at the grease stains on my hands, then grabbed my keys and drove straight to the hospital. The room was white, dimly lit. Eleanor lay pale against the sheets, an IV dripping beside her. On the side table, the contract she'd been signing, her name only half finished. I sat down beside her, took her hand. "All our lives we've been fixing machines," I said softly. "But sometimes what needs fixing most is the heart itself." She gave a weak laugh. "You still talk like a philosopher, Jack." "I haven't changed," I smiled. "I've just learned not everything broken needs replacing. Some things just need rest." She fell quiet, then whispered, "Grace was lucky. She had a man who kept his promises." I shook my head. "No, I just did what decent men do. I stood up when the world tried to make me kneel. Justice isn't payback. It's balance between what we've lost and what we still manage to hold." A few weeks later, Eleanor recovered. Her company paused its expansion, redirecting resources to a new program, Restoration for Veterans. We hired veterans and jobless mechanics to rebuild forgotten vehicles, giving both engines and people a second chance to run again. I taught the younger ones how to weld frames, how to hear a broken engine from its very first heartbeat. They called me Old Man Jack. Sometimes they'd joke, "You're the only guy who can diagnose an engine just by listening to its heartbeat." I'd laugh, "No. I just know how to hear the truth in its noise." One spring evening, I drove the Mustang 1967 onto the open road. The ride was smooth. The air was cool. The scent of lavender, Grace's lavender, still drifted from the backyard garden. At a red light near Nashville Auto Recovery Center, I saw her. Samantha. She was wiping down a workbench, her uniform streaked with oil, hair tied up, sweat shining on her forehead. When the Mustang rolled by, she looked up. Our eyes met. No hatred, no bitterness. Just quiet recognition, two people who had once lost themselves in the dark, now standing at opposite ends of the same light. I didn't speak. Didn't need to. I simply nodded the way a craftsman might nod to an apprentice who once failed, but finally learned to start again. She lowered her head and went back to work. I drove on. The radio played softly. Simple Man by Lynyrd Skynyrd. I turned the volume down, letting the song melt into the hum of the engine. The roads of Tennessee stretched out before me, the sunlight bouncing off the hood like a mirror. In that reflection, I saw everything I had left, myself older, slower, but unbroken. Grace smiling somewhere between the clouds and the wind. And Ryan back at the garage showing the young ones how to tighten bolts the same way I once showed him. People think honor is something others give you. But the truth is, it's something you choose to keep even when no one else believes in it. I pressed the accelerator. The Mustang glided across the Tennessee fields, grass glowing green again after winter. The sky burned gold, its reflection rolling across the black paint like fire. Everything shone not because I had won, but because I had finally stopped fighting. As I crossed the Franklin Bridge, the sun dipped lower, pouring light through the windshield, turning everything to gold. I smiled, loosened my grip on the wheel. And in that quiet, I heard her voice, clear, soft, as if carried by the wind itself. See, Jack. The light always finds its way back. I whispered, yes, Grace. It always does. The Mustang merged onto I-65. The engine's deep hum blended with the wind, a final symphony of metal memory and mercy. Not a song of vengeance. Not a cry for justice. Just the quiet rhythm of a man who had finally learned to let go. Justice doesn't need to be loud. It's the kind of light that helps you see yourself again, to remember who you were and who you've chosen to become. If one day you're betrayed, would you choose revenge or choose to rise again without needing anyone's apology? Tell me in the comments below. I read every one. Like if this story spoke to you. Share it with someone who believes in second chances. And subscribe to the channel for more family revenge and redemption stories where justice finds its way home.